How to Create a Glitch Monologues Season 30 Chapter 6. This is Season 30 of How to Create a Glitch in the Matrix Monologues Episode 6. In this episode, we will be discussing the repackaging of tension from orthogonal thought in the payment of capital for labor. In the last few episodes, we discussed how the alienation of capital from labor, the transformation of labor into capital, represents decontextualization, abstraction, of the experience, and the generation of orthogonal thought. That is to say, that this decontextualization results in convolution in the behaviors of labor, pursuant to the use of that capital to purchase a service or product from some other. In this convolution, the manifestation of that secondary purchase represents an out in the behavior of the laborer. In other words, labor for capital is associated with convolution of thought and the generation of an out, which eliminates the tension separated from the laboring behavior, which is appropriated separately according to social reinforcement. We also talked about how the possessor of capital becomes a recipient of orthogonal thought as well, the tension from the laborer's labor translated to the possessor of capital. This means that the possessor of capital must also manifest some convolution in their behavior, producing an out, or they risk creating dissonance in their tonic-dominant relationships. This convolution can result in the generation of exegesis of that experience, the transformation of that tension into further orthogonal thought, which radiates through the creation of a product of the experience to some other purchaser. Now, this process represents the transformation of capital for labor into exegesis, the manifestation of which is innovation. Thus, within the capitalist system, the possessor of capital achieves innovation through the conversion of the tension of labor into the exegesis of orthogonal thought. This produces the product of exegesis, which becomes the embodiment of that innovation. In other words, the alienation of labor and capital generates opportunities for innovation due to the separation of the tension from the act, the transmission of that tension through decontextualization of the experience, to the possessor of capital. Orthogonal thought, exegesis of experience, was discussed in a roundabout way in Episode 4 of Season 7, which talks about the outsider effect in the production of new archetypes and narrative. In that episode, we talked about the creation of new archetypes and narrative has the effect of producing content for the assimilation of the group, generating new styles, identity and narrative. As nature abhors a vacuum, new archetypes and narratives will produce assumption by group members. The outsider effect arises out of exegesis of experience, the creation of new content from the transformation of experience into orthogonal thought through decontextualization. That content becomes the vocabulary of the future, the generation of new patterns and vocabulary for the evolution of the system. This new content is produced just as innovation in the context of a capitalist system, the division of labor and capital. The radiation of tension, decontextualized from experience, produces either reactive emotionality or further convolution and the generation of some new innovation, some product of exegesis, for consumption by the masses. Which is to say that capitalism does not just entail the alienation of capital and labor, dissonance in our tonic-dominant relationships, reactive thought in response. It also generates opportunities for innovation and the generation of product from exegesis. That's the end of the podcast for today. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe.